water has become, I don't know what you call it. I make my living in the music business, and I found that I was often looking for water as a theme to some of my music and my writing. And then I live in the community of Guelph, Ontario, and we started to have some issues that I'll be talking about with the sustainability of our own watershed and our own water supply. And as a local activist, the two things that I do as an activist and professionally as a writer seem to come together. So we'll be talking a little bit about that today too. So the Wellington Water Watchers was a group created just a very few years ago. And while I'm going to take you through the story of it, and in the story of the creation of the organization, you'll learn of why we needed it and where we're going. So I'm going to try this machine that I haven't used before here. But in my own community, I think, like many of you, I was very complacent because I turn off the tap every day. We have really great water. It was always there. I've often talked to school groups, even with this water watcher group, that's, you ask a kid where the water comes from, and they say, the tap. And they don't know that it comes from the ground or a pipe or whatever. Ours comes from the ground. It's groundwater. But because we are slated to grow exponentially in the Places to Grow Act, it looked like we were going to quickly outgrow our own water supply. So the solution in terms of our government isn't to control your consumption. It is to expand your supply. So that's when it came up that maybe we should have a pipeline from Lake Erie to Guelph. And a lot of people thought it was a good idea. A lot of us did not think so. So we took part, along with the Council of Canadians, to say no to that pipeline. Eventually it happened, which means that was the first battle in the sustainability of our water supply, in that we know that we have to be proper stewards of our own watershed instead of borrowing someone else's. A lot of communities that are doing that are already having really big problems. So our particular water, we're very proud of, comes from a deep aquifer. The good news with that is that it's excellent water. The bad news is that no one actually knows how much is there. It has very few particulates, natural low level of fluoride, so it's very good drinking water. But there's a lot of threats to the sustainability of our water supply, and we are very unique in our community in that just outside the city limits is the Nestle, I wish I had reverb for that, the Nestle water bottling plant. They draw their water from the same place, and it's always a mystery to us Guelphites that all over North America, you can buy a Nestle water bottle that was bottled from the same water that we draw from our tap water, and they'll charge you for it, and it's the same water we get from our taps. They get to take 3.6 million liters every day, which, because some of you have these 500 milliliter bottles in front of you, that's 7 million every day that they manufacture there. I should have brought an actual Nestle one to show you. It's easy though. You just step outside, you'll see them littering the ditches and the roadways of our highways and byways. So they actually, and they also draw from the town of Hillsburg, which is about 50 kilometers away. They draw it there and truck it to the Guelph bottling plant, and that's another issue we'll deal with a little bit later. So as far as the sustainability of supply, that they're drawing about 7% of what our city draws every day. They're taking. For that privilege, they are paying about $15 a day, not per bottle, not per liter, but just $15 a day for making those 7 million bottles. And they pay a permit application of $3,000 every 2 years. There's a strange good news and bad news to that, too. A lot of people say, well, just make them pay for it. Just make them pay a bottling charge, and we'll derive some benefit from that. Then it becomes a commodity. Once it becomes a commodity, a whole different and even scarier set of rules kick in. to do with NAFTA in particular. And we don't think they should go there, but what they're using right now is a water taking permit that is so antiquated. It was designed for farmers that wanted to irrigate their fields. There hasn't been any updating on it, and as an organization meant to protect the sustainability of our watershed, we're asking whether in these times just water taking for commercial purposes is even relevant today. So that's something we'll be talking about as well. So what's the basic problem with Nestlé? They seem like a nice group of people. They make good chocolate. Most of the water that they bottle leaves the watershed, even though they'll claim that it doesn't, because they changed the definition of what a watershed means, and they thought that meant the Great Lakes. So the water leaves, it doesn't come back, and over the time, if a watershed is depleted, the water table will go down, wetlands will dry up, habitats will disappear. We all know what can happen because there's this big company there sucking more. It affects our growth potential, and just the fact that it's leaving the watershed itself. It actually has an inaccurate depiction of what other watersheds should be doing, is looking after their own. Okay, James, move ahead one. So they actually take, as I mentioned, the same groundwater from the same source as the city. They get 7% of what we have. There was a recommendation in the community, the Pushlands community where the bottling plant actually is, that that groundwater should be set aside for future use. However, Nestlé is a big supporter in the community in terms of donations and support for instance, giving great big skids full of plastic water bottles to the schools in Aberfoyle, where the town is. So there's a lot of pressure to keep it going. A lot of pressure from the province. It provides, in making those 7 million bottles a day, by the way, the actual plant only has about 30 jobs because it's all automated. So a lot of those, another reason why we're having a problem is the mountains of waste. Those, you've seen it. Those 7 million bottles, they have a claim. I'm surprised they're not here, actually. They have a really amazing Teflon-covered spokesperson that often follows me around. And they'll claim that a lot of their bottles are recycled, and you've seen them. If you look in any place on the ground, in a landfill, what do you see? There's two things that you see. Besides water bottles, what's the other thing you see? Plastic. Tim Hortons cups, the other thing. It's another case I want to get on one of these days. So we are paying for them to dispose their bottles. And the Ministry of the Environment has a guiding principle that encourages us to reduce, reuse, recycle. We don't think that the use of the plastic water bottles accomplishes any of those things. Another reason, number 5, are we actually being proper stewards of our watershed by letting this happen? Because we don't know how much water there is in that aquifer. And we are actually becoming slaves to multinational corporations this way. They are all about growth. They will say, well, we're respecting the watershed. We won't take too much. We've seen it in other communities. There's a community in Michigan you've probably read about that when they suck the water dry from a community, they have the luxury of moving somewhere else. We don't. So we also believe that the granting of a permit for them to take that 1 million liters for free is not practicing resource conservation for the benefit of present and future generations, as is required in the Environmental Bill of Rights. Number 6, this is a very controversial topic. The plastic bottles that you have in front of you claim to be health safe. We don't know still. The talks about bisphenol A, but we do know that tap water, especially there was a strange benefit of the Walkerton tragedy. Ever since then, our municipal water supplies are so well monitored and regulated, much more so than the bottling industry, that we are pretty sure that in, I think, 96% of the cases in municipal water systems in North America, you are getting a safer drink out of your tap than from buying that bottle. They've done a strange thing. You've seen it happen with corporations everywhere. Mostly Nestle and other water bottles are responsible for checking their own water supply. Oh, this is awfully hard to read. I'll read it for you. We've also discovered, that this water trucking business, they take this 1 million liters per day from the Hillsburg plant, gets hauled in trucks 50 kilometers one way, up to 80 one-way truck trips per day, and you can just guess on the footprint that your water that comes out of that bottle is generating just from that. And it drives through the little community that I grew up with in Rockwood, Ontario, and those trucks make the 80 one-way truck trips. These are big trucks. That's 2 ways. They have to go back too. So that's 160 times a day. That little town of 1,000 people is seeing a giant truck go right through the main street, carrying water that really shouldn't be used except for the people in Hillsburg where it comes from. And it's all, the reason it's there is for profit. Okay, James's personal favorite. I believe that bottled water is, reverb again, the scam of the century. And to that end, I'm going to sing you a song now, because that's the other thing I do. And the song is called The Scam of the Century. And it goes approximately like this. I think my guitar and my... Well, sorry. And the song was born of the notion that somewhere, someday, maybe about a generation ago, some executive came to, a junior executive came to the head of the board of directors of Nestle and said, I've got this idea. There's something that we can get for free, that everyone can get for free, and we've got a way that they'll want to buy it from us. And you can picture the president going, get real. He said, no. First of all, and you've seen this, if you are about the age I am, it started about a generation ago when they first started to get fashion models and sports figures to carry around. Evian, wasn't that the first one out? The Evian bottles? And people go, oh, that's cool. That looks very healthy. So they convinced with, I have to give them credit, pure marketing genius, convinced a whole generation that we should be carrying those around. And they also convinced us that it must be better, it's hipper, it may be safer, and more convenient than tap water. And because they were so convincing in that, you've probably noticed this in your community, water fountains disappeared almost overnight. So that now we actually do need to carry around something, because you can't drink municipal tap water if you're visiting a community. So there's the song. Let me get this straight. Are you telling me we can take your water? You'll give it to us for free. Then we sell it back to you. How can this be? It's gotta be the scam of the century. Too good to be true. Who would have thought we could sell you something you've already got? It's better than chocolate. This deal's so sweet. It's gotta be the scam of the century. It's the very same water comes from your tap. If you're stupid enough to fall for that, you can't blame our nice little company for getting in on the scam of the century. We learn to sell people something they don't need. Selling baby formula in third world countries. You'll buy anything in a bottle, it seems. It's gotta be the scam of the century. Those millions of bottles we make every day, your tax dollars pay to haul them away. Our profit's more pure than water you see. It's gotta be the scam of the century. It's the very same water comes from your tap. If you're stupid enough to fall for that, fell back to you, the company. It's gotta be the scam of the century. And when we've drained your water supply, when you've sucked those suckers dry, we'll just move on down the line. Let me get this straight. Are you telling me we can take your water, you'll give it to us for free, then we'll sell it back to you? Too good to be true. It's gotta be the scam of the century. It's gotta be the scam of the century. Thank you. So I know I got a bug in my bonnet about Nestle. I think what bothers me is their claim. We've met with them. They're actually human beings. They've got two eyes around the nose and everything, and they're trying to do a job. They are looking out for profit. That's why they're there, and that's what corporations are for. But they have really been taking advantage of consumers about a product that is totally unnecessary, and they've convinced governments to keep these water taking regulations there because they think that it would threaten our economy if we lost those businesses. I think if you're having a little bit more vision, you'd see that it's going to threaten a lot more than our economy if they continue to threaten our water supplies. So what did we do when we learned about the threat that was there? My friend Mark Goldberg, who's a toxicologist, he's the one that noticed trucks leaving Nestle and thought, wait a minute, where does that water come from? It just seemed to be this little shadowy thing. He discovered that their permit for renewal was coming up in April 2007. He called me up because I'm a shit disturber in the town. And we called a meeting and formed the Wellington Water Watchers. We just missed by like one day having the website www.www. Oh, would have been perfect. But now we're WellingtonWaterWatchers.ca. Look us up. But we discovered that when these permits come up for renewal, the public is asked to submit whether they think it's a good idea or not. And it's always come up every couple of years. And on average, they were getting maybe half a dozen letters saying, well, maybe we should think about that. So we thought, well, okay, we'll get a letter campaign going. And we got 8,178 letters to the Environmental Registry. And suddenly they took notice and said, well, maybe we should think about this. We thought they were going to try to, we were hoping they would deny the permit. What they did was renewed it for 2 years instead of 5 years and gave them a slightly less that they were able to take, slightly more in terms of monitoring. And we think that's a victory, but there's a long way to go with it. We now have, it says there are 950 members, and we started by encouraging to be positive about it. We're not saying our campaign isn't plastic water's evil, although I'll say that happily, but our organization is saying refillable water is good. So these are stainless steel water bottles. We have distributed 14,000 of them already, and particularly with a campaign that I'll tell you about soon. So we think it's having an impact, and one of the reasons we know it's having an impact is that, again, I'm surprised that they're not here today. Nestle is starting to get nervous that we're threatening their market. And my main point to you today is that it looks like we could lobby our government to do something about bottled water. It looks like we could lobby the companies themselves to be better stewards. The only way to do it is to take away their market. And the only way to take away their market is to stop buying the bottles. And they're very smooth. They are really objecting to our campaign that we're doing in schools to get, we've distributed thousands of these in schools because they say that kids will just drink pop instead if they can't have their bottled water. So they're actually looking out for the health of young people. And we always say to them, well, we think we should work together to get them off drinking pop. We could get them to turn on a tap and fill up their refillable bottle. Why do they have to buy your plastic water from him? The fight, and you've probably seen it in your communities, is that they also have contracts, particularly Coca-Cola with Dasani water. They'll have contracts in schools that are locked in for years, which actually have, for one of the clauses is they have to remove the water fountains. They have to have these dispensing machines with their bottled water in them, and that money goes towards a lot of the school supplies that and the hockey teams and things like that used to be until the Harris years came around. It used to be part of what we did in the education system. Now it has to be raised through other sources, and it's a pretty good source of income. So a lot of school boards are reluctant to part with that source of income. So it does all come down to money, unfortunately. But we think there's been a lot of consciousness raised. So how did we do it? We decided to make it a group of equals shared responsibility. Our group works by consensus, transparency, inclusiveness. We try to make it a lot of fun so that we don't get volunteer burnout. We have a really good working board. We have dinners. We tend to meet in the pub, so we're watching beer sometimes instead of just water, and try to have some fun about it. Choose a goal, make it attainable, and our goal was to get an unprecedented number of comments, and that would raise the consciousness. And again, we got 8,178 letters. It's coming up again. That's renewal next year. We're hoping to not only get more letters, but to just make a bigger impact with convincing not just our community, but the province that there needs to be something done with the Ministry of Environment that protects our water supplies and perhaps rethinks whether water taking for bottled water is a relevant use. Oh, look at that. I don't know why it did that. It just seems to get bigger instead of going to the next slide. Well, do you like it bigger? Maybe if I point at my computer. Maybe if I go here. Just bump it up. Yeah. No, it's not going to the center. Oh, did it? Now it's not going to this. Okay. So I mentioned before, we find if we just said to people, you know, I'm a zealot about this, so I'd see people with their Nestle bottle, and I'd sort of say, hey, why are you drinking that? There's a lot of information out there. If you accentuate the positive by saying, here's an alternative, here's why it's better, we seem to make a lot more progress that way. So promoting the tap water, we actually had a campaign for a while promoting it the way that they have premium brands of bottled water. We had a premium brand of tap water called Municipal, which we thought sounded a little bit better. And once the member, buy a membership, you get one of these bottles, and then they became their own walking salespeople with these. It just as a generation ago became trendy to carry around one of those Evian bottles. In our community, it seems to be a little bit trendy to be carrying one of these around. And us extra trendoids have the plastic water sucks sticker that goes with it. So we got lots of press with it. We had to make sure that our facts are right because they've got better lawyers than we do. Brought in national speakers. We started to show up everywhere. We made the local news because Nestle is starting to get so nervous about us. And once they're nervous, we know that we're having an effect. We started to bring, see there's one here, we started to truck water in to public events. We have a festival in our community that we served 18,000 liters of water past year, and we've taken around to many others. And you probably noticed that's one of the major sources at fairs and exhibitions when the fair is over, you see the grounds just littered with plastic water bottles. So this is one easy way to address it. We've got, there's our little message, keep it simple. So we started to reach to the next generation, youth in the high schools, and partner with other organizations, and then talk to our politicians who are still, our elected officials seem more worried at this point because it's still the economy stupid before the environment smart. They're worried, oh, well, it'll be a loss of jobs. But really, it's going to be a lot of jobs lost if our own water system isn't sustainable, and we have to start cutting back on what we can do. We use a lot of social networking, and we started to just demonstrate what successes we had. So then we discovered it's not just all about the bottled water. There's some other issues in our community. That aquifer that we've got, there's a company that's a quarry, and they make gravel, and they've been for 100 years beating down towards that aquifer. They've cracked a nice hole in it into the aquitard that protects the aquifer, and so that means that surface contaminants can enter the groundwater. And they are quite cleverly, if you look at a map of the city of Guelph, it's like a big circle, and there's a little pie shape sliced out of it. And from lobbying, because it's quite a large corporation, they've convinced that part of the city is not technically in the city. It's in the township, because it was easier to convince the township to keep them in business than for the city. So they're still banging away at that, and we're hoping to get some results with that as well soon. So our current and most successful campaign is this message in a bottle. So we've been going around to the schools, making a presentation, making these available, and inside the bottle is a bookmark, and the bookmark is filled with messages about water conservation and why that we think that this is a more sustainable way than plastic water. And the kids become advocates, and they bring the bottle and the message home to their parents. And it's been really inspiring to see how the little kids are talking their parents into not sending them to school with those plastic water bottles. We have another campaign now called Blue W, and that is to start to identify. It's one thing to have a refillable bottle, and perhaps in your communities you're finding this too. It's another thing to have ready access to how to refill it. So we've got there's an iPhone application coming out that you can go to your community, dial it up with the Blue W campaign, and it'll show you restaurants and public places that are buying into the campaign saying, your refillable water bottle is welcome here, and you're invited in to refill your bottle. I've found out that, I don't know, maybe if this is community by community, you're actually, by law, if you're a restaurant, you're not allowed to refuse someone that comes in and says, I just like to fill up my bottle, and yet it happens all the time. So that's an exciting new campaign we're doing as well. So we've got funding. We got a grant from the Trillium Foundation in Ontario. To our goal were to get 50,000 bottles in total to every school child in Wellington County. And we think that promotes the use of tap water, reduces the number of single-use disposable plastic water bottles, and reduces greenhouse gas generation. So there's, what's in that message that comes in the bottle. You can see it there. So this particular project will eliminate about 100 tons of GHG emissions annually. And that's sort of just the start. If this idea spreads, we think it'll get somewhere. And they do seem to be taking action to reduce global warming, and the presentation that our representatives make in each school shows how the water is related to the rest of their environmental footprint. So they have to pay for the bottles. Right now, we haven't got sponsorships to cover the whole thing, but they normally retail for $20, and they're able to buy them for $5. So there's some of our funding. We got a grant from Ministry of the Environment Community Go Green Fund, and we're trying to expand it to this whole campaign outside the schools to other events, and then sort of market the scheme to other communities that want to buy into it as well. Your community could do it. We'd be happy to show you how to set that up. So there's also a board game now that the kids can get that shows them how to keep a small footprint by going around the board. This is what the Blue W website will look like. So, and it's already up. You can just dial in your community, and it'll show you spots that have already bought into the campaign. That and I think they're all the places that have bought into that so far are really proud to be taking part of it, and it's actually good for business. You know, they don't, in the restaurants, they're not selling you a glass of water, but by having you come in hopes that there's a partnership there, that you'll patronize their establishment as well. So that's our motto, and I think show the video if there's time.